Okay, amazing. So with Hashem's help, we're going to jump back into our learning of Sichos Haran, Be'ezras Hashem, bursting with insight and guidance and wisdom that we're learning from. That's the English translation, is Rebbe Nachman's wisdom of Sichos Haran. And we continue with Sichos Haran Kuf Beis 102, which is quite lengthy. And we've begun to work our way through it. We already started 2 weeks ago, and then last week we got through the bulk of it. And now we're going to finish it off and hopefully have enough time to look at Sichos Haran Kuf Gimel 103 as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and let us jump in. And thank you again to everybody for joining us. Ashreinu, what a privilege to learn these teachings together. Okay, so Rebbe Nachman continues over here, Sichos Haran Kuf Beis, and the tzaddik says like this, V'teida klal zeh, because if you remember, just to focus us, we're speaking a lot about emunah, right? We're speaking about the good life, the way that ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, that a person who lives life with emunah, but real emunah, where emunah is not just in the head, but v'ashivoisa elav avecha, it comes down to the heart. We're able to really live and implement this experience of faith into every aspect of life. So that's the sweetest life that we could imagine. A person has somewhere to turn when things are going wrong. A person understands that kol mada avid rachmana, every single thing that happens, latav of it, it's all for the best and it's all for a reason. And all the different aspects that we discussed last time at great length about the difference between a life that's chas v'shalom lived with the Amalekian, coldness, the kriros of a meaningless world. We spoke a lot about that also last night at our Hanukkah shiur, which we have a new series leading up to Hanukkah. So we had our second installment last night, and that's in the process of being uploaded. So that'll be sent out a bit later. But we spoke a lot about that as well. Approaching the world with an interpretation of faithlessness, which is really hopelessness and despair, vis-a-vis a person who approaches every single minute of life as saturated with endless meaning, aimless shiur. There's no way to explain, to express, to imagine the difference between one life and another life. So we're continuing in that vein, and Rebbe Nachman carries on, and he says, "V'teida klal zeh," a person has to know the following important thing: Ki kol hayiras v'chol hayisurim, all fear and anxiety and all suffering sheyesh la'adam, that a person experiences, and this is also confirmed by modern science, everybody knows this, they have an adverse impact on a person's physical health. Forget about their mental health, which has somatic symptomology as well, is gonna impact the way that a person's actual physical health is, but they shorten a person's days. A person who lives life with worry, with stress, chas v'shalom, it's a real thing. It can cause chas v'shalom heart issues. It can cause all kinds of stomach issues. It has a real impact on the physical body of a person. And conversely, a person who lives with emunah, our tzaddikim lived phenomenally long lives, like unnaturally long lives. In the past couple of generations, we've seen the Gedolei Olam not all of them, but generally speaking, it's quite remarkable. Rav Chaim Kanievsky or Eliashiv are two that immediately come to mind, or Rav Vosner, tzaddikim who really lived a very long time because they lived with Yishav Adas and emunah, and their emunah enabled them to live with a positive consciousness, with optimism, and that keeps them open. That keeps them open to all kinds of health that's able to flow down. The system isn't closed. It isn't stuck. It's a flowing system. Things are able to flow properly. And so Rebbe Nachman says, chas v'shalom, if a person is not living that way, so it can actually shorten a person's life. Says Rebbe Nachman, well, if that's the case on a physical level, then it's only a small jump. It's not really a jump. It's just an indicator, as not just to the quantity of life, like how many years a person will live in terms of the impact on their physical health, but of course that is just going to be reflective of the quality of a person's life. That if they're makatzer a person's yamav in quantity, then they can actually cause a person, chas v'shalom, in a very real way, to live less, right? To live a shorter life and to leave the world, chas v'shalom, early. So then certainly it's reflective of the quality of a person's life. He says, therefore, these kinds of people, that the whole time they're busy with these sophisticated interpretations and philosophizing. Chayim enam chayim klal. And there's no their lives are no life. They're not really life. Because naturally, like we said, that type of philosophizing leads to a tremendous amount of worry and pain and suffering and a sadness that is devoid of any light at the end of whatever tunnel. It's just darkness, 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 darkness. Chas v'shalom, what a terrible thing. And so he says that it eats up their lives, it devours their lives, both in quantity and in quality. But a person who has yira, it's not like anxiety, but a person who has concern for the quality of their own life, but in a holy way, that they're worried, am I doing what I'm supposed to do in this world? A person who's constantly some derech, right? Like the Gemara says, Al tikr some derech, sham derech. A person evaluates their ways. A person who's misboinen. A person who does cheshbon nefesh. A person who does hispodedus. A person who's constantly thinking, am I living for real? You know, and that causes a sense of worry. Not in the same way, because ultimately part and parcel of that approach is the emunah, like we said last week, to know that everything's okay, you know, and Hashem is really running our lives, and in as much as we're doing the best that we can, you know, but there's this constant tension between our hishtadlus and our bitachon, our 6 days of the week energy of really trying to accomplish and do as much as we can, balanced with the consciousness of Shabbos, which according to the Hasidic tzaddikim is an aspect of ki'ilu kol malachtecha asuya, not just in physicality, where we're supposed to consider all of our work to be like ki'ilu finished, so you can come into Shabbos with absolute peace of mind, but it's actually seen as a reference to our spiritual growth, kol malachtecha asuya, from the standpoint of Shabbos, which is the standpoint of ultimate emunah, the lost princess, right? The ultimate emunah. Everything's already done. You're already okay. You're already okay. And it's this constant tension between, again, you know, the energy of the 6 days of the week of Olam Hazeh, and then the emunah of Olam Haba, Me'ein Olam Haba, of Shabbos, Malkusa. This is the balance. But from the standpoint of a person having that, what we call in Breslov, Baki Baratzai, you know, to be an expert in knowing there's always more to do, there's always higher to rise. A person thinks, you know, really, am I making sure that I'm using my time properly? I'm not going to live forever. Every minute is mamish precious. Every minute is precious. Am I utilizing my time properly? How's my tefillah? How's my mitzvahs, my simtaivim, my ben adam l'chavera, you know, etc., etc. Am I doing everything that I can do to make sure that I live a meaningful life? Says the Rebbe, this kind of yira, this kind of yira is very good. Hey, my sifim yama. Hey, my sifim yamim. This kind of worry, quote unquote, adds life to a person. B'chayim, and it adds a life. The Bechinas, as the pasuk says, Yiras Hashem toisif yamim. This kind of quote unquote fear, right? But again, it's not fear, because it's not in the same way like a person doesn't know what's going to be. No, a person again is balanced with it, is healthy with it, but a person is taking life seriously. So that kind of yira, that's a very good yira. That's going to add days to your life. That's not the aspect of an anxiety that shortens one's life, unless the Yisro Hara dresses himself up in the clothes of the Yetzer Tov and is causing us to actually feel real anti-emunah anxiety about matters of religious faith, which is mamish, the worst kind of klipa, is the worst kind of amalek, when it causes us to think, because of religiosity, I have no hope. And I have to really think like maybe my whole life was a waste, etc., things like that. That's mamish, the satan, shebes satan. That's the very first teaching of Likutei Moharan. Rebbe Nachman already warns us against that. To know that the Yisro Hara is nislabish himself b'mitzvahs. This is like the, you know, one of the primary shticks of the Yisro Hara. His main strategy is to dress up. That kind of yira, no, that's an unholy yira, and that's gonna eat away your days, chas v'shalom. That's gonna eat away a person's life. So again, it's a very specific kind of yira. It's not a yira of sadness, and it's not a yira of hopelessness. That's always the klipa, right? All of the midas are able to be elevated except the midah of hopelessness. There is no way to elevate the midah of despair. Ein says Rebbe Nachman, because it doesn't really exist. It's a complete illusion. Ava exists, right? It comes from the sphere of chesed. Anger exists. It comes from the sphere of Gevura. Pride exists. It comes from the sphere of Tiferes, and so on. Atzvus doesn't exist. It's not real. Because it is the anti-midah. It's the concealment of all the other midas. There is nothing you can do with it, which is exactly what we're about to learn. Please keep this in mind in Sicha Kuf Gimel, which we're about to get to. We're about to get there, right? It is totally an illusion, and there's nothing you can do with it from the standpoint of Aliyas Hamidas. That's why Rebbe Nachman says, Ein shum yish ba'olam klal. Not only there is no despair in the world, it means there's nothing to do with it, as Rebbe Nachman says elsewhere in our Kuf Nun Hey, I think. Right? Atzvus mida rama oid v'Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu soneo ta. Hashem hates atzvus. It's the ancient miyash b'olam klal, because again, it's not really real. It's the Satan that doesn't really exist. It's darkness that exists when there's a void of light, right? But that's all it is. It's not a real thing. It's not a real thing. Okay, so that kind of despair, no, there's nothing holy you can do with that, and that chas v'shalom is going to waste away a person's days. But if a person has a positive, healthy sense of seriousness, takes life seriously, there's gravity to life. A person understands that time matters, and life passes the blink of an eye. And Adarabba, there's so much hope because I can still become a tzaddik, and I can still work on myself. I can still reach a madrega. I could add on a little bit more, and I can etc. etc. That is going to add on life. That's something very holy, and that's hinted to in this pasuk. Yiras Hashem, Toisif Yamim. That kind of fear is gonna add days to a person's life. So the Rebbe continues, this, that a person also has a certain kind of fear and brokenness, really, over this, that a person fell. And a person was not able to hold on to a standard. The Yetzer Hara came and swept the person away in a rush of delusion, right? The Yetzer Hara is called, we're also learning this in our Sunday night series now, the Koyach HaMedameh, right? It's the force of Midam, of Dimyan. It's total Dimyan. It's all an illusion, right? And that's called in the Gemara in Saita, the Ruach Shtus. It's the spirit of folly that hits a person, blinds a person walks in blindness. And that aspect of being broken over that. And a person has tremendous pain from this, which Rebbe Nachman, Torah Zayin and Tinyana, and the second Chelek says over there that there's no greater burden on a Jew who's active and conscious. There's no greater burden than that. Because to a Jew who's conscious, anything else is already secondary, because I'm only in this life to do Avodas Hashem properly. And so what, a person loses a job, they lost a job. Okay, so what can you do? It's horrible, and you figure it out at some point, and etc. And it's difficult, but a person does an Aveira, and it's like it's the essence of why I'm alive. And so it's the greatest burden, again, it's the greatest pain that nothing else can come close to a Jew who's really conscious of this. Mom is trying to live for Hashem, and then a person slips, causes terrible, terrible anguish. Says the Rebbe, that's also good. Eila Yisurim, again, these kinds of sufferings, this is also good. This is also going to add to the quality and the quantity of one's life. Because obviously it's such a good indicator. It means that it matters to you. You're not stuck in what's referred to in Rebbe Nachman Etar and Vav as hastara shebesaycha hastara, where your distance from Hashem is concealed. So you think you're close, and a person doesn't realize that they even broke anything, because a person is numb, doesn't care. And so that's Rebbe Nassan and Likud Halach is commenting on the famous teaching of Rebbe Nachman, Matama Amin sheyecholim lekalkel. If you know that you could break, if you believe that there's such a thing as breaking, ta'amin sheyecholim letaken, you should believe that you can fix. And Rebbe Nassan says, it's an unspoken question, is that really true? Like if you can break things, that automatically means you can fix them. It's much harder to build than to break. The person has to be a tremendous architect and all this incredible wisdom that goes into building a building, and then some idiot, comes with a wrecking ball and presses a button and smashes the whole thing. Is it true that the same way you can build, so you can break, you can build? Yeah. Says Rav Nassan, no, it means the following. Says the Heilige Zisar of Nasan, Sichos Haran, he says, "Imatama amin sheyecholim lekalkel." If you're conscious enough to know that an Avera breaks something and you feel that pain and you're not blind to it, that you think, it doesn't matter, so what does it matter? And you carry on, but it matters to you because you realize that it does matter and that it does break things and you have emunah still to know that the whole world is on your shoulders and that it really does matter. Not just for your olam haba, but for the whole structure of existence, like the Nefesh HaChaim explains at great length and in great depth in the first shiur of Nefesh HaChaim. Highly, highly encouraged reading for everybody to learn shiur Aleph and Nefesh HaChaim. Imatama min shecholim lekalkel. If you're awake enough spiritually to still have enough emunah to know that a sin causes destruction, says Rebbe Nachman, good, then you're awake enough that you'll manage to fix it. Ta'amin shecholim letake. Then you're okay. Then you're okay because you haven't become numb yet. But if a person doesn't believe sheyicholim lekalkel, meaning again, it's not that a person knows that there's such a thing as breaking, but the person doesn't believe that an avera really, matters all that much, and it doesn't bother him. A person, does whatever they do, and then they carry on, and it doesn't just nothing, says Rav Nosson. So then it's not so simple, because then a person is sleeping, and then it's not so simple. It's not so clear that a person will be able to rectify. Not because they cannot rectify it, because like para, the heart is closed up, like the Rambam says, it's possible for Hashem to cause a person to be so like kshe oref and a lave even, like a heart of stone, that it's not that they can't do tshuva, it's just that they don't even believe that they need to do tshuva. They don't even think that there's such a thing as distance from Hashem. And so what a terrible thing. So says Rebbe Nachman, this is good. This is a good sign. It means that you're still awake. It means that you're conscious, so that the knife cuts you. You feel it, but if you don't feel it, then a person's like in a coma. It's a terrible thing. A terrible thing. So it's a good indicator when you still have enough emunah to believe that a sin causes damage. Ki ayisurin shala, he says Rabbi Nachman, this, that a person feels the pain, it's good. Hey, that's an indicator that you're still alive, you still have emunah. Whether on the higher level, because you recognize really the awe of Hashem and Hashem's presence and how much I mean to Hashem and how much pain a person causes Hashem and so on. Or a person understands that there are consequences. A person sticks their hand in fire, they're going to get burned. A person pushes God out of his life, it's going to be a godless life. It's going to be a godless world, chas v'shalom. And that's a real thing. It's a real consequence. Like I mentioned last night, it's not a punishment. It's just a consequence. This is the way God set up the world. There's something called hanagas hamishpat. It's mida keneged mida. And it's not a punishment. It's just the way the system is. When you stick your hand in fire and get burned, you weren't punished. It's just fire burns, And living a life, because we push Hashem out of it, is a life without Hashem. And that's no life at all. As we're learning, that's no life at all. Because it all comes from Yiras Shamayim, and that's going to add on days. Yiras Hashem, Taisif Yamim. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Then the Rebbe continues and he says, Gam mishu ish emunah, if a person is a bal emunah, hatshuva shalahi yoser kala. Then it's a little bit easier to do tshuva. Now this is very delicate because the Baal Tanya writes in Tanya, Likutei Amara, that on the contrary, the greater the person is, the more egregious the sin is. For this same reason. Right? Meaning, a person just doesn't know anything about anything, and a person really never learned about the severity of Averis and so on. It doesn't understand, and so then they do an Averis. What can you do? It's not that bad. But then there's the idea that it's tzaddik and medaktikin kechut hasayra, right? Chazal say that for a tzaddik, even the slightest thing, Moshe Rabbeinu, whatever he does, he hits the rock, he doesn't speak to the rock, he gets angry at the people, Rashi, Ramban, whatever it was that Moshe Rabbeinu did wrong, and like, what a consequence. Can inherit Yisrael now? Like he can't finish the thing that he devoted his whole life to. It's impossible for us to understand. But tzaddikim, there's an aspect of the way in which the averos are much, much more severe. Much more severe. And that is true. Rebbe Nachman is pointing out that while that is true, there's another side of the coin. There's a corollary. And the corollary to this idea of that the tzaddikim are medakdikim behem kechut hasayra is this, that tshuva tzrichen lias tshuvas hamishkal. Tshuva, we know, has to be equal. That the Rambam says that the primary tshuva, take for example, a person chas v'shalom does something with a woman, let's say, person slips and falls in that way. So the Rambam famously says the ultimate tshuva is to be back in the same situation with the same woman, with the same opportunity to act, and then he doesn't. Says the Rambam, that's the perfect tshuva. I mean, you absolutely rectified what that was, because this time you abstained. It was the same things, same circumstances. Rebbe Nachman abstracts out of that more specific circumstance the fundamental essence of Teshuvah HaMishkal, which has to do with the degree of sacrifice in relation to the degree of pleasure. Says the Rebbe, in order to rectify whatever illicit pleasure a person had from whatever it was, the tshuva has to be that this time a person overcame. This time a person didn't fall to the ruach shtus, that the koyach hamedama that convinced a person that this was something worthwhile. No, a person holds tight to his das, to his wisdom, to his consciousness. This is not what I want. This is not who I am. This is not going to give me what I'm looking for. This is not even what I'm looking for. I want dvekas to Hashem. I don't want anything else, etc., etc. A person holds onto that narrative, and a person, tzaddik, slips out of the thing and runs away. Vayima'ain, right? Says the Rebbe, to a person who is not an ish emunah, the pleasure that he'll get is much, much greater. Is much greater. Because there's no guilty conscience present that even in midst of the act is letting the person know, already feeling the pain of knowing that I'm gonna suffer from this. This is not what I wanted. This is not really what I want. So a person who's not an ish emunah, the tshuva is much harder. Because again, if tshuva requires a person to undergo an equal degree of sacrifice and suffering vis-a-vis the amount of pleasure, than to a person who has much more pleasure in the experience of an avera, to that degree, the person has to experience the suffering of tshuva. But says the Rebbe, Umachar sheyesh le'emunah, when a person has emunah, even though again we said from the Baal Tanya, it's true that the tikkun is much harder and it's much more severe. It's true, but the tshuva process is much easier. And all of us know this. A person who's a real Eved Hashem, you can never really enjoy an avera ever again. Right? A person can do an avera, we don't really enjoy it. We don't really enjoy it because in that moment, like the Ma'aranayim explains based on the Baal Shem Tov, a person feels Hashem is there with you in that moment. And the Ruach Shtus can tip a person, sort of to the point where the person will do the Avera, but there's always going to be a part of them that's still conscious. And maybe that's the ultimate extent of the pain that the person really feels afterwards, from the standpoint of knowing, like, there was a part of me that knew that wasn't what meaning it wasn't like the Yitzhar completely washed me away in a tidal wave and whatever. No, a person knows there was enough of me conscious really to be able to overcome. Yeah, there was enough of me there. And so a person who's a Baal Emunah doesn't experience an Avera properly. Because even during the experience of the illicit pleasure, whatever that is, it's mixed with anguish. Because he knows that 2 minutes later, he's going to be very, very upset about this indeed. Whether it's in the next world, the cleansing that's necessary, but much more relevant, I think, in this world, this is not the life I want to live. This is not going to bring me happiness. It's just that the Yitzhar was very strong. The Rebbe understood it, he mamish understood it, what we feel. The Yitzhar is the Yitzhar, but in Ish Emunah, it's a bechina of what Chazal, in one of their most honest moments, it's one of the most like relatable Chazals, where the Chazal comments on the pasuk Vayitzer HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam, and the word Vayitzer contains two yuds. It's I'm not sure if it's Gemara Medrash, but Chazal say one of those yuds stands for the word Yotzer, which means the creator, and the other yud stands for the word Yetzer, which is the evil inclination. Say Chazal, Oili mi Yitzri, Oili mi Yotzri, which means the Jew is always caught between a rock and a hard place. If he listens to Hashem, Oili mi Yitzri, so he's going to suffer from the Yetzer Hara. And if he listens to the Yetzer Hara, Oili mi Yotzri, then I'm not able to enjoy myself either because the voice of Hashem is calling me. So a Jew is always stuck. You're like, darned if you do, darned if you don't. It's not easy. The person's stuck in this world, gonna have to suffer one way or another. Adam la amal yula. This world is a world of pain and suffering and work and toil. That's the shlichus, but that's a really honest thing. Chazal don't give you the illusion of thinking that the minute that you commit to Avodas Hashem, it's going to be peachy and everything is a walk in the park. No, no, no. Oili bi Yitzri. You're going to be harassed by the Yetzer Hara. It's not going to be easy. And guess what? The minute that you slip Chas v'shalom into Yetzer Hara, that also you're not going to be able to enjoy because Oili bi Yitzri. And that's very, very real and very honest appraisal and presentation of the condition of a Baal emunah, who has a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, and it's not fun either way. It's just not fun either way. So, but at the very least, says the Rebbe, what we do gain from this is an easier tshuva process. Al kain tshuvasai kala yoser. So a person's tshuva is going to be easier. Ki ein sarich lizbol yisuri hatshuva, because a person is not going to have to suffer the great pains that would have otherwise needed to be suffered if he taka felt the pleasure of an avera. What a limud schus, chevra. What a limud schus for people like me, like us, who have emunah and aren't perfect. What a big schus to remember, okay, a person does averas, but you didn't even enjoy it, b'chlal. Right? Because a person's emunah, oili miyotri, is so strong. It's such a chizuk. Because sometimes we look back and we think, how am I supposed to rectify all of this? And we have to know, most of it is already rectified. Most of it is already rectified by the Gehenna that a person feels in middle of the Aveira itself. It's not a Gehenna that you have to get in the next world, or a Gehenna even that a person will get in the consequences of this world. But the Aveira itself is Gehenna. A person doing that which they're not supposed to do, again, if a person is conscious and awake, which Baruch Hashem, all of us are, and as Hashem, most of our holy nation is, at least a significant portion, is experiencing the Gehenna of the Aveira itself. The Aveira itself. And that itself already fixes it up. And that itself already. So what was it, B'chlal? That was really a moment of distance from Hashem? You couldn't forget about Hashem while you were in middle. Hashem is there too. Hashem is so, and this is so says the Rebbe, to be an ish emunah. And then you know that you messed up. Okay, so you're still attached. You're still davuk. You're still connected. Again, a person will not need to experience the suffering of tshuva so much because, again, the moment of the Aveira, also the pleasure wasn't complete. But a naturalist philosopher, who doesn't have any emunah in anything higher, no spiritual realm, nothing, just believes that what you see is what you get. Oh gosh, he says tshuvasik feda yoser. No, that's going to be difficult to fix because those are real averas, right? That's a full experience where a person doesn't have any conscious harassing him. A person is really in it, and that's it. Because that person doesn't experience Gehenna during the Avera. And again, the tshuva is going to be equal because it has to be equal. And chas v'shalom, that comes with the very heavy consequences indeed. This is like an unbelievable sicha. This is so, so important and crucial. It's just remarkable. It's an absolutely remarkable sicha. It's wow, what a special teaching, what a privilege. Wow. The Ayin B'Sefer Shnei Luchos Habris, he says, look at the Shlach Kaddish from Secha Shvuah Shamavur B'Yoser Goydel Oitzah Me'isel Estakel B'Sifrei Amachakrim. Many of the tzaddikim warned us against involving ourselves with these Sfarim, especially most people, right, who can get very convinced and drawn away. A person is forfeiting, really our connection to Olam Haba when we get dragged into ways of thinking that are the opposite of emunah. Terrible thing. Terrible thing, because the main thing in Yiddishkeit is simplicity. The main thing in Yiddishkeit is emunah. It's the prerequisite for everything else. The only way in is through emunah. That's the only way. And no amount of proofs and philosophy is going to help a person get to the truth. No philosopher would have ever been able to come up with the mitzvah of tefillin. Even if he came to every truth in the Kuzari, mitzvahs are revealed. They're straight from Shemaya, and they require emunah. That's our special gift as a nation. We have, this is our thing. We have mitzvahs. We have yamim tovim, that aren't arbitrary and made up. These are straight from heaven. Straight from heaven. Okay, let's take a look at Sichos Haran Kuf Gimel. And together with Kuf Gimel, Be'ez Hashem, we'll take a look at the Mea Shilach and Parshas Yisro-like. Says Rebbe Nachman, this is a bit of a radical presentation over here, this idea. And you have to be very careful with it. This one is you have to know how to handle it. Says the Rebbe, Toiv Yoser Lios Pesi Yaman L'chol Davar. These 4 words, Pesi Yaman L'chol Davar, is a pasuk, I believe in Mishlei, which says a fool believes everything. It's a gullible person is a foolish person, believes whatever you tell him. A gullible person. Says the Rebbe, sure, it's not a good thing to be a fool who believes everything. But says the Rebbe, you know what? And again, you have to understand how he's saying it, right? He doesn't now want us to go believe in everything in the world. But the Rebbe is trying to make a point. He says, he says, rather be a person who's gullible and believes everything, that will even open the person up to really believe in some things that aren't really true. So that within all the things the person believes in, they'll also believe in the truth. And that's better in terms of an extreme, which the extreme is never good, right? So, but again, he's setting this up as a polar sort of abstraction to enable us to understand the point that he's trying to make, right? So better be that than to go to the other extreme, which is Meliyas Chacham, which is to be a sophisticated person, and then a person just denies everything, cynical about everything, and then good, so fine. So maybe you'll protect yourself, right, against believing in some things that ought to be believed, aren't worth believing in. But at the same time, Chas v'Shalom, a person will come to even deny the actual truth. To be a person who's denying the falsehoods and the lies, but then what's going to be the product of that? So then everything is litzanis. And then a person will come to believe in nothing. Very powerful. And he quotes over here Rabbi Akavia ben Mahalalel, the Mishnah in Adius, where he said, Umutav shayakari shaita kol yamai, better that you, meaning the rest of the Chachamim who paskin against me, call me a fool, but this is what I believe is true. And I'll rather be a fool than to be wrong. I'd rather be called a fool than to be wicked. So we hear the Rebbe, again, is presenting an extremity, right? The reason this is dangerous because, okay, so maybe I should believe in Christianity also, just in case. Maybe I should believe in Islam, just in case. Maybe I should believe in Hinduism, just in case. And better believe in everything because, because at that point, well, then maybe at some, I'm playing it safe. Of course, that's not what the Rebbe means. Right? So he says, obviously there's a degree of seichel that's required for a person to be discerning, to really utilize their brain, like I was talking to somebody earlier today, that it's not just about feelings. Feelings is toiv and ra. Brain is emes and sheker. We have to use our brains. Very, very important. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us rationality, right? Yiddishkeit is never about blind faith. It's never about, sure, there's emunah, but there's also emes, right? Emes ve'emunah kol zayis. It's both. And we have to use our rational minds to be able to help us get to the emes, and then from there, leap off into the world of emunah, right? But to make sure you're jumping off the right diving board, that takes seichel. That takes seichel. We have seichel. We're allowed to use seichel. But the Rebbe is saying as an extreme, best not become a person who is so careful about what they believe that they end up denying everything. You remember what the Kotzker said about the stories from the Baal Shem Tov, right? You remember, he says, if you don't believe any of them, you're a kofer. If you believe all of them, you're a fool, right? So what should I do? So according to the Kotzker again, and according to the way that the Rebbe is saying, the best believe all the stories for the Baal Shem Tov, right? With again a healthy pinch of skepticism, because that we want the MS, but at the same time, imagine a person who comes along and says, "Oh, it's all babyish and it's all nonsense, and I don't believe anything unless I see it with my own eyes." So okay, so you'll lock yourself out of the MS too. And so, like everything in Breslov, synthesis and balance is the most important thing. That's the most important teaching of Rebbe Nachman. Balance, 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 balance. Balance. Hefkeirus einam strichim. Remember, we learned in Nun Aleph, we had like 10 shiurim on that sicha, remember? Right? The Rebbe says radicalism, not necessary. You don't be a radical in any way, shape, or form ever. It leads to unhealth. It leads to unhealth. This is not what Breslov is. Breslov is balance. Find a balance. And there's like an Overton window of what balance is, right? For some balances, at one point along the spectrum. But there's a general aspect of balance, right? There's sort of a general phase, and every person will sort of fall along that line. But to be a person who's balanced, that's the inyan of Yaakov Avinu. That's the inyan of Am Yisrael that come from Yaakov Avinu. Is the middle, Kavim Tzai. That's where Yiddishkeit is born. That's where Yiddishkeit thrives. That's our message to the world, a message of balance. Okay, so we have to approach this teaching also with that mindset, because again, it could be dangerous. A person reads this and says, "Oh, Rebbe Nachman is saying better believe in everything, and then you'll believe also in the truth." Chas v'shalom, right? You have to use your brain, but at the same time, we don't want to become cynics. We don't want to become cynical. That's very dangerous. So over here, let's turn to this teaching in Parshas Yisro from the Mei Shilach and the second chelek. And the tzaddik says, "Vayishma Yisro." I might have learned this with a chaver over the years. I don't remember, but it's good to review anyway. Vayishma Yisro, and Yisro heard the Medrash Rabbah says, "Hahu d'chsiv." This is what the pasuk means in Mishlei when it says, "Leitz take." You have to hit a fool. I'm sorry. Leitz take. You have to hit a scoffer, a cynic, a person who's sarcastic, sardonic. Take. Right? Such a person needs to be beaten, right? Again, in a metaphor. Upesi ya'arim, but the fool will be elevated. A fool will be lifted up, will become wise. Says the Medrash, Leitz take, this fool that we're referring to that needs a good beating, ze Amalek. This is a reference to Amalek. It's a Leitz. Amalek is the cynic. Amalek is the cynic. Amalek is the inyan, like we've been learning, of krirus, of coldness, of mikre, of happenstance. Amalek's the big philosopher, Rebbe Nachman says in the Kutumran, in I believe it's Tar Yud Tes in Tinyana. Where Rebbe Nachman says Amalek's energy is the energy of again, naturalist philosophy. Where a person doesn't believe in a God, a person doesn't believe in spirituality. That's mamish Amalek. So that's the Leitz, is Amalek upesi yarim, but the Pesi will become wise, ze Yisro-like. And that's a reference to Yisro-like. Says the Heilige Ishvitzer, Schusa Yagan Aleinu, Leitz. What is a cynic who mislikes it's Haldvar MS? Is a person who's cynical about everything, and even the truth will be cynical about. But upesi hu amam l'chol davar, right? And that's what he says, Pesi yaman l'chol davar. A fool is someone who believes everything. Now, says the Mei Shilach exactly what we said. Right? They're both not good, right? It's not good to be on either one of these extremes. You don't want to be a person who just falls for everything and be gullible your whole life. And you don't either want to be a person who's cynical about everything. But there's still a difference. And that's the point that Rebbe Nachman's making. So you have to learn Sicha Kov Gimel properly and in the context of other teachings from other tzaddikim, because then you see it properly, right? This is Mamish, he's addressing this point. He says, "Ube'emes shneihem einam toivim." Neither extreme are good, but there's still a difference. Achein ala leitz nemar take, because it doesn't say both the fool and the cynic need to be beaten. No, al haleitz nemar take. It says about the cynic will be beaten shehu lo yagil das chesron l'sakin, because he says a haleitz will never end up finding the truth. Meaning, the pesi also needs tikkun, right? That's also not good, but at least the door is open. At least the door is open. So in his exploration of the different faiths and of different philosophies and different ideas and different beliefs, the door is open. The person's a seeker. They'll find the truth in the end. But such a person will never find the truth because the door is closed because he makes fun of everything. And so there's no hope. It's almost as if there's no hope. He'll never listen to anything you tell him. But the fool that's constantly seduced. There are people like this, they're different religion every week, and a different thing they get into, and this is their whole thing, and they go from thing to thing to thing. But you know something? What a beautiful thing, because they're seekers. They're mevakshim. They're not mesloititzim. They're mevakshim. So it's true. It's not good to be mispatam called davar. You got to use your brain, and a person develops ways of understanding what is true, what isn't true. Especially in today's world, a person needs to really think very deeply about this. Where am I getting my information from? What do I believe? How do I know? Where did it come from? Who are these people? What are the motivations, the biases, the narratives, and so on and so forth. But he says a person who's a pesi, zeyuchel kabbalah emes. Such a person, in the end, he'll get to the truth. And in the end, such a person will come to rectification. That's why it's almost as if, what's the whole thing of Amalek? Is despair. And Amalek, who lives life as if hopelessness is a real thing, is actually hopeless because they get wiped out entirely. Meaning it's this point to the extreme. What you give is what you get. You put out an energy of hopelessness, you are going to, chas v'shalom, not you, but meaning that person will be hopeless. I have a line in my book, From My Heart to Yours, that from the time of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, once Rebbe Nachman of Breslov came to the world, there was no emotion as hopeless as despair. Right? It's this idea, right? That there is no hope, there is no despair in the world at all except for despair. The midah of despairing should despair, right? Because again, it doesn't start. So it's trying to put out an energy of hopelessness that itself is hopeless, because there is no hopelessness in the world. There cannot be hopelessness in the world. So the only thing that's hopeless is hopelessness. You hear? So it's a bit of a mind twister. But the only thing that's hopeless is hopelessness. Precisely because there is no hopelessness in the world. So any energy of hopelessness, like a black hole, doesn't exist. It's nothing. It's negative energy. So Amalek, the cynic, who's trying to convince everyone that there's no meaning in the world, guess what? They have no meaning in the world. So Amalek gets wiped out. Because nothing good can come from an Amalek. Nothing good, because they're not seeking, so they'll never find the truth. But Yisro-like, that went and he served every avodah zarah in the world, but he was a mavakesh. So yeah, he spent his whole life in shtusim v'avalim and so on. But you know what? In the end, he came to the truth. First, he believed in avodas kechavim amazalos. He believed in polytheism, ethnic gods, avodah zarah, v'avalim, and vanity. But then, because he was a seeking soul, when he saw the unequivocal expression of godliness in the world through the chosenness of Am Yisrael and the incredible master plan and the love that Hashem showed Am Yisrael, Kriyas Yamsov, Melchemes Amalek Daika, right? That was one of the things he heard. It was Melchemes Amalek. Amar. Then he said, Ati Yadati Ki Gadol Hashem. He said, no, now I've arrived at the realization that there's only one God. There's only one God. Ki Gadol Hashem, V'nizgayer. And that's why the Medrash is saying on the pasuk Vayishma Yisro, Leitz Take is Amalek, Upesi Yarim say Yisro. And that brings us back again to Sicha Kuf Gimel. This is what Rebbe Nachman is saying over here. Toiv Yoser Lios Pesi Yamin L'chol Davar. Better have the energy of Yisro. Doesn't mean to be an idiot and be gullible and follow every religion in the world. But it does mean to be a person who is naturally open. Not so quick to deny everything, anything that doesn't fit into our exact narrative. I did a Facebook post about this recently. To be a person who's open, not so open-minded like they say your brain falls out, but to be open, not to quickly jump to defend whatever it is that we already believe. We'll never learn. We'll never ever learn that way. Not as an individual, not as a community, not as a nation. Be open, and then we might discover some MS, because the energy of Amalek is the energy of the Leitz, is the energy of the Chacham, who denies everything, including the truth. Okay, Yidden, Ashreinu, we're going to end, I guess, a bit early today. What a privilege that we were zeichet to learn Sicha Kuf Beis and Sicha Kuf Gimel, and next week we will be carrying on and getting really into the heart of the Sefer as we move in, mamash, to the middle third of the Sefer that has, again, 308 entries, and unbelievable. It's just totally life-changing. What a privilege that we have to be connected to this tzaddik. Ashreinu matoy chalkenu. And again, we're only connected to this tzaddik because we're not leitzim, right? A leitz will never be connected to Breslov because there's so many reasons to make fun of it and to mock it and to doubt it and to this. You can only connect, and it's like your ticket of entry is how humble you are and how tamim you are and how you're willing to look past all that and seek the truth where it is found. And then we, Baruch Hashem, we gain access to this incredible world of the tzaddik's teachings. Okay, Asher Kreach, thank you everybody for joining. Wishing everybody the most incredible rest of your week. And Ashreinu for the women. Maybe we'll have to see you later for the Yichud HaSpods this year as well. Thank you very much for joining. All the best. Eltif, thank you.
האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני נושם